Hey, hey, hey. It is Auticus, and I am back with another episode today to discuss narrative campaigning. It was asked in one of my previous videos to discuss my experience running narrative campaigns, or campaigns in general, I should say, and I thought that would be a good idea to kind of go over. That is not a short video. So if you're watching, if you're paying attention right now, we're going to discuss two things. Number one, we're going to kick off with a discussion on the different attitudes towards wargaming, especially as it is today. And number two, we're going to discuss my experiences in running narrative campaigns and the goods of that and some of the things I found that you may want to pay attention to, especially if you're new at that. So a little bit about my background. I started wargaming in the summer of 1988 with Battletech. I got into Games Workshop Warhammer in 1998, serving in the military. My Dungeons and Dragons group were at a store, and we were looking for miniatures for our game, and we were buying Warhammer miniatures. And one of my players said, "Hey, did you know this is actually its own game? It's a war game." And that was intriguing. I liked wargaming, so I got, we looked into it and got sucked right into it. That was 5th edition Warhammer, which did not excite me very much. But 6th edition Warhammer came out about a year and a half later, and that is my favorite current edition of Warhammer Fantasy. Now, when we use the word campaign, a campaign in its simplest form is simply this. It is a linked set of battles that lead to a result. That means that even a tournament, if you go to a tournament and play 3 or 4 games, that you can look at that as a type of campaign. In fact, I know people that do just that. They are campaign players, but everyone around them is a tournament player. And so for them to get what they want out of the hobby, they have to pretend, I guess, that their games, when they go to a tournament or when they're doing these events, that they're making up the events in their head as they go, and they're linking the battles together to determine their final outcome. Campaigns themselves can be competitive, can be narrative, can be any mix of in between of those things. They can be anything, really, as long as it's a set of games that all link together to form a result. A league is another example of a campaign. In fact, in sports, you'll hear like the upcoming football season. They'll call it the upcoming campaign. It's a linked set of games. It's important when working with this hobby to understand that when you play the game, that the game consists of usually 2 people at the table, and that the experience is a shared one. And that because there are 2 people at the table, it's important that both sides, both parties in that agreement of time exchange are getting what they want out of the meeting. And I find there are 3 basic levels of engagement in Warhammer. And the most common one is pickup, random pickup. And I'm going to leave that one to talk about last just because. But that is by far the most common. The second most common personality that I've encountered is the competitive player. Now, to this day, and I've had this very talk in social media, I think I've probably done videos on this in the past. To this day, that word competitive will draw different conclusions to different people. You have a thought of what that means, and I have a thought of what competitive means, and sometimes they don't align with themselves very well. This really came to a head for me when I was vanguarding Conquest and COVID hit, and we played a lot of remote games, so I was playing a lot of games against guys from the UK, which was an awesome experience for me because they were competitive players, But to them, it was as important to them that I was having a good time as it was that they were winning the game, even though they were competitive. And that was a very strong lesson for me to learn, because here in the States, I had never, and to this day, have never encountered really that other than in personal private groups. These guys would ask me, hey, I've got my list ready for our game. Do you want to go over it? No one over here has ever done that, because over here, competitive players want to try to win in the list building phase. That's part of it. Like if I can come in with a superior list and play the game on easy, that's my goal. Whereas over there, they want to make sure that the game is enjoyable and close for both people. And this is how their tournament players can have enjoyable games with either more casual players or players that just aren't good. They try to match up armies with them, which I thought was brilliant. It's definitely not something I see over here in the States at all. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, just means that I've never run into it personally in the 25 years or so that I've been doing this. So I would like to see more of that. But anyhow, so competitive means different things to different people. So I'm going to use the definition that I know, and yours may be different. But as I understand competitive play, you are going to build the hardest lists as possible, and you are going to show up and show no mercy to your opponent. Doesn't matter if he's new, doesn't matter if he's been around for a while, doesn't matter. You basically always play the game on hard. Like you're going to play it full blow. And you're not going to give quarter. And some people will actually get upset if they find out you pulled punches or played lower to your ability, because to them that's an insult over here. So that's competitive play to me. The problem I have with competitive play, and I was a tournament player from 1998 to 2007. I traveled. I did the grand tournaments. I did Baltimore, Chicago. I did one in Dallas. I did the Indie GT scene when it started in 2005 or 6. I can't remember the year. We traveled to Arkansas and other places. My problem with competitive play isn't that competitive play is bad. It's just that it got boring for me because you saw the same lists over and over again. When you're playing optimized lists, you're excluding a good chunk of the rest of the game because you're only focusing on spamming what's really, really good. Yes, not always. There are a few players, and I can count 4 of them on. So I have 1 finger left over on this hand. This is the number of players I've known in my life for that went to big tournaments and fielded lesser armies, B armies, and did well with them. They were savants, except for one of these 3. He got caught cheating. He knew how to do dice tricks. So because he knew how to do dice tricks, he could influence his dice rolls with non-loaded dice. It came out that he got caught doing that. And, well, yeah, so he's tarnished. And the other 3 may be able to do that. We just don't know. That's my own personal experience. That's competitive play. Okay. Narrative play. Narrative play means that I want to see armies that I think would be in the fiction. If I was watching the movie of Warhammer, I would see that army. The problem with this mindset is that you can't prove any of that. There are no Warhammer movies. There are no real historical forces you can draw off of like a historical game. So it's just as valid to say that spamming the most egregiously hard lists, tournament style, is a narrative army. And I have seen and probably participated in my more vigorous youth that argument, which I'm not going to do anymore. I'm not interested in that argument. But you're trying to see more of the world. You're into Warhammer because of the lore, of the units, of the history, all that. That's what appeals to you. You want to see more of that on the table. So your forces are going to be more, it's going to have gimpy units in it because those gimpy units would have existed in the stories to you. And last, you have the pickup gamers, which make up the vast majority of every person I've ever known. And those people are basically, they're very, very much related to competitive gamers in that a lot of them are just going to buy either what they think looks cool, which there's a good chunk that do that, or they're going to get what the tournament players get, but they're not really interested in events. They may play in a couple, but they're not really there for events. But they're going to play whatever's legal. So again, you're at the mercy of whatever it is that they decide to bring. And if they've gotten on a website that showed them what the number one Adepticon list was, and they're fielding it, yeah, you're going to have to be aware of that and be okay with that. Yeah, some people are, some people aren't. The key is, going back to my original comment that the Brits taught me, is you have two people at that game sitting across from each other, and both of those people are having a shared experience. So if only one of those people is having an enjoyable experience, there's a problem. So that's why it is important that you only play with people who have the same goals as you do in terms of the game. If you do that, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, Warhammer 40K, any of the GW Ecoverse games really, really are a lot of fun. And I've had a blast. That's why I'm sitting here doing an old world video, and I don't really wargame anymore. But it's important to find like-minded individuals. And I'm going to have some funny stories to share with you about my campaigns, and you're going to understand why that is. So, when we talk about running campaigns, be aware that if you don't set expectations in the beginning and you're trying to make it a public store event, you are going to attract everybody. That means the competitive players are going to show up with their Adepticon list to your campaign. So either that's fine, or if it's not fine, you have to make that be known. Now, that's where it starts to get problematic, because people don't like to be told no, and you can have some bad times as an event organizer when you tell people no. I've told people no my whole career doing this, and I've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of good events, but I also have a lot of stories and a lot of not so fun things to share as well, which can color your reputation, whatever word you want to use for it. There will be people who don't enjoy you, and you have to be okay with that. So you want to run a campaign. You want to set expectations. My advice, unless you really have thick skin, don't do it publicly. Don't be a store event organizer. You really get nothing out of it. It's a very thankless job. Basically, you get screamed at when things go bad. It's just not a good time normally, unless you just acquiesce to everything that they want, in which case your event is going to be a bog standard event that you're only going to attract certain people to. And if that's what you want, that's great. I would recommend, and going forward for me, I'm only playing with people I know. Now, I do plan on doing an old world narrative map campaign, and I'm going to do that on Tabletop Simulator simply because I don't really have a group where I'm at here because I moved to a different city. And the game stores here are not very happy with the old world. There's a lot of stores. This is a very large city. There's a lot of stores. I know 3 now who have said some version of, we're not planning on carrying this because we don't want it to fragment our player base. So there's some opposition, and I don't really have a group to play with, so I'm going to play online with Tabletop Simulator. That being said, if you want to participate in a narrative campaign, which is narrative, which means you're not trying to break the game, I'll leave a link in my Discord, and you can jump in, and we can have those discussions, because there will be a channel for that. But you want to run a campaign. So it's a first thing you want to do is you want to identify the types of campaigns you want to run. So I've run, I don't even know how many. I've lost track. I've run probably well over 50 public campaigns in my quote-unquote career. Because not just Warhammer Fantasy, I used to run 40K, I've run War Master, I've run X-Wing. I've done all kinds of different game systems that I forget. I don't even remember them all. But I follow a kind of pattern. So identifying the type of campaign you want to run first is important. And if you've never done them before, I don't recommend you try to start off big with something like, what you see on the screen there, Mighty Empires, which if you can get a hold of that box, that's gold. That's Wargaming in general. That's treasure, and you want to get a copy of that. I still use some of those to this day. I've rewritten my own Mighty Empire systems. I used to call it Azyr Empires. If you followed me in Age of Sigmar days, when I did the Azyr Comp system, way back in launch. Azyr Empires, I did 1.0 and 2.0, which was basically Mighty Empires for Age of Sigmar. Fantastic system. I love it to death. Very in-depth. It's 80s stuff. So it's 1980s design. So it goes deep. The easiest place to start would be an already written narrative campaign, which is essentially just going to be stories. It's going to be a set of linked scenarios that lead to a conclusion. You want it to be short, 3 or 4 battles. And that's going to give you a beginning and an end, which is very important to have. Don't try open-ended campaigns. You always want to have an end date. You always want to have something that you're an end goal, so that your campaign doesn't just fizzle out and die like a bad fart, because a lot of them will do that. You have at your disposal literally a treasure trove of different things you can find. So this is the very first one. Actually, this isn't the first one I ran, but this is from 5th edition. This is Circle of Blood. These used to be box sets that they would put out. And the box sets had like cardboard terrain in them, and it was a linked campaign book in there, and there was like 4 different missions you could fight, and they had like unique special characters and stuff. And that was my first foray into campaigns. The 5th edition rulebook, as much as I did not like 5th edition, had a great resource campaign, which is kind of, I can tell Oathmark draws from that. If you know the game Oathmark, the resource campaign in Oathmark is very similar to it's more in depth than the Warhammer one, but you can tell he took some, and he's been around for a while too, the author of that system. So I don't doubt that he pulled that from the 5th edition book. A resource campaign, we'll talk about that in a minute. I was talking about narrative story-based campaigns first. But Circle of Blood was my first story-based campaign system. Then you have another piece of gold if you can find it. I've got a bunch of books here I'm going to show you all. So Warhammer Siege with the original sticker on it. This was $25 back in '99 or whenever I bought this. Gold. I still use this book. I've used this book for a ton of stuff. But it's got a siege campaign in it. So it's a whole campaign around sieging a fortress. Not just one battle. Different scenarios that lead up to different things that you can use. All right. And then we have, let's see if I have any more. Oh, yeah, we do. We have a bunch. These came out in 8th edition. Sigmar's Blood. Blood in the Badlands. And probably one of my epic favorite ones of all time. This was Throne of Chaos Tamarkon. I ran this in 2013. This guy, beautiful book, beautiful artwork. This was, I picked this book up at one of the last games days they did. And that was right before Horus Heresy had come out. And they were getting ready to launch. They were talking about the artwork. They had shown some of the artwork for the pass. It's some, I can't remember the name of it. It was an orc. It was an orc campaign, basically. Something pass, Axefire pass or something. We were so stoked. And then, of course, Horus Heresy kind of took over Forge World from there, and we never got that. But what those give you are linked stories. That Tamarkon campaign was probably the apex of all the campaigns I've ever run. We had 52 registered fantasy players in that campaign. And on our final battle, we played it at a mall. And we had a 30-foot long table. And at that 30-foot long table, we had like 24 players that day fighting on the same battle, one big giant table. And we had a Magic the Gathering score clock. So you broke with all those people. You have to you're on a timer. It's like, okay, you got 15 minutes to move, go. And there'd be a timer up there and had the score. And people from all over the mall were crowded around that whole day taking pictures. And that was an amazing day. That was the apex of my campaigns, was that. And that was fantasy, and we had 52 fantasy players for a system that supposedly no one liked or cared about. So we did really good fantasy-wise. Actually, and we did really good 40K-wise because we had like 60 players at that for that campaign that year. Anyhow, story-based systems are designed, they're already built for you, so you just follow along the story, play them, write your own if you want, but they have a definitive beginning and a definitive end. Next type of campaign that I enjoyed was a node-based campaign. This is what I ran in 2014, Lustria. Lustria had some new rules in it. It had the concept of nodes, and essentially what that means is you go down a list of potential outcomes, and based off of outcomes beforehand, you will play different types of battles, essentially. This thing also had random jungle encounters, and yeah, Lustria. Jungle's blocked line of sight. I don't remember if that's actually in the book or if I made that a campaign rule, but we'll just say that this book was where I was, the first guy who wanted to fight me was because of this book. He played a dwarf army, and he had been warned, jungle's blocked line of sight, don't bring your tournament list, you're not going to like it. And he brought his tournament dwarf list, which is a gun line, and that does not work in a jungle, right? That's the whole point of being in a different land, a jungle, to do different things. And he was super, super pissed. And, we'll just leave it at that. He was super pissed. And, but Lustria ended up, I think everyone voted Quicksand as the MVP. One of the random encounters, if you rolled it, was Quicksand, and if you were heavily armored, you were basically going to die. You had to make an armor save, and if you made it, you died. So you didn't want to stack up armor, but people would still bring lots of knights and put their heroes in all this armor, and then they would die to Quicksand. And some people were good sports about it, and other people were not so good sports about it because that wasn't tournament standard. These are things that you're going to have to recognize and deal with. This is why playing with people of a like mind is so important, because if you're not playing with people of like mind, you're going to have these types of clashes, especially if you're deviating from the tournament standard, which was battle line, battles, scoring. And in an old world, I think that's probably going to rear its head again. And I could be wrong because I haven't read the rules yet, but I'm hearing it's all about kill points and battle line stuff. So if you start putting objectives on the table in your campaigns, then someone who's playing dwarves is going to complain, because they're going to have built a gun line to sit in the back, and now they have to move around and grab objectives, and they're going to say that it's impossible, and you're going to hear an earful of it. So keep that in mind. You need people who are willing to do things a little bit different from tournament standard, and that can be hard, especially with the cost and the expense of this hobby. It's not a cheap hobby. So a lot of people just come in and they buy an army that they want to use for everything. So tournaments means that they want a super powerful army, but they want to go play in campaigns too with that same army. That's where a lot of that anger comes from, or a lot of that dissatisfaction comes from. So you have to decide, do you want to really, break into that and deal with it? Some other alternative campaigns. I used to love these. This is Path to Glory. This lets you start with a tiny little war band and move your way up. This does not have the cover on it anymore because I've beaten this to hell. This is the old Skirmish book. This is another, if you can get your hands on this is gold. This is from 6th edition. I used to use these before battles. So what they would do, if you were to go through one of the the scenario, it would say, if this is part of another battle, if the attackers won, then this helps their army. And if the defenders won, this is how it'll help their army. And these were like little 150-point games. So the skirmish rules were absolutely fantastic and fun ways to incorporate that into your campaigns by making not everything just be a standard pickup/tournament setup. You have a skirmish game beforehand to set up. Maybe you have it the night before because they're really quick, and that can influence your game the next day. Gives another dimension to your games. I also used to include War Master, so we would have Warhammer was the zoomed in version, And then we would have like the overall, we'd have the War Master battle going on a different table, which was all, the big armies, because War Master is teeny tiny scale. So those are also things that I've used in my work. The last book I want to show you, and this is how it ties into Mighty Empires, are the Grand Map Campaigns. This book right here, the General's Compendium in 6th edition, is absolutely the best book that Games Workshop has ever produced. In my opinion. The best book. Still applicable today. It goes over many different campaign systems that you can use, to include a map campaign, the Border Princess campaign, which I still have that map somewhere in my house, with the pins still in it from when I ran it 20 years ago. Gives you some great ideas. So the map campaign is what I'm going to do my Old World campaign with as well. I have to wait. I want to wait to get the book, to get the rules, to get the general story so that I can make it story appropriate. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a place to fight, and we're going to carve that baby up into provinces, and we're going to have a campaign over that. Now, I mentioned resource campaigns, Oathmark. Map campaigns, resource campaigns, these are more advanced levels of campaigns. Mighty Empires, which you can see above me, that is like the apex of complex campaigns. It is the goal and dream of many campaigners to play in some epic map-based Mighty Empire style campaigns. And I've done a few, and they are, I agree, 100% that's the reason why I play these games, is for stuff like that. 100%. Because a well-run map campaign is something you will never forget. You will tell tales about it years and years later. I still have fond memories, again, 20 years later past when we ran the more complex map campaigns. My last Conquest campaign was a map campaign that I had written rules for. So with a resource campaign, with node and story-based campaigns, it's easy. You're going to play this scenario, and your only real challenges I find are that tournament style or competitive style, or pickup gamers that only built a competitive list will get cranky and kind of squeal a little bit because they're no longer the apex. Everyone realizes that the army lists play a big role in these games. And if you try to say they don't, you're not being honest. Some of these scenarios will disadvantage tournament lists because the scenarios and objectives will be different from what they've built against a tournament. So if a tournament is always kill points based off of battle lines, then you know that the army that the person bought is likely optimized to that scenario. And then if you bring in narrative campaign scenarios where the objective is take and hold the hill, that's completely different from what they're built on. They're not hosed, but they're not at an advantage anymore, and they may get mad about that. All right. That's really the only complications I can see with story-based campaigns, and that's why I say, if you've never done one before, a campaign, those are always good ones to start because they're pretty easy. Resource campaigns and map campaigns can use off-the-wall scenarios. And in fact, I do. I do not like standard scenarios. I do not like knowing what the scenario is going to be beforehand, unless it fits the story. And I always tell my players that do not optimize your list thinking that you're going to get to use that optimization. This is not a tournament. Part of my campaigns are you have to mitigate things you did not expect because that's a battlefield. And that's why I like to play. And that's how I like to run my campaigns. If you don't like that, don't play in it. All right. So I'm always upfront with that. And you'd be surprised, no matter how many times I'm upfront with that, how many people still want to fight me in the parking lot because their optimized list was at a disadvantage and somehow they were robbed. I can't change other people. I can only forewarn you if you're going to walk that path. Resource campaigns mean that you have territories or you have something that gives your army bonuses. Now, the 5th edition Warhammer battle book came with a resource campaign. That was the very first campaign that my group ever ran, and it was a lot of fun. I loved it. Oathmark, you can get today runs a variation of that idea, only he goes a lot more in depth. I plan on looking at the Oathmark books and probably using that to work into my own campaign systems because he's done a lot of great work. So something I would, recommend to you. Go check out Oathmark and see how he's done his campaigns. The problem with resource campaigns, and this is including putting them on a map, because a lot of map campaigns, they don't have to do this, but a lot of map campaigns will go hand in hand with the resource thing, is that once somebody has a sizable advantage because of his resources, everything is snowballed from that point, and your campaign is effectively over. And because of that I don't really like those, or I like them with a lighter touch. It doesn't take long for someone to amass a lot of good bonuses, and then no one else wants to play that person. And basically the campaign is over. So you have to keep that in mind. The map campaign, the Mighty Empires campaign, General's Compendium, if you can get your hands on it, get it. It goes over the Border Princes campaign. It's a great campaign to base your other ideas off of. That's why, again, if you can find this, Games Workshop, if they would be nice enough to republish this book is gold. This book is absolutely, in my opinion, the best book ever written. You carve up the map. You can do it with hexes. I like to make provinces out of the map. You can use Photoshop or whatever you want. And I like to have little special things in each of the provinces, where if you're fighting on the lake, there should be a lake on the table, and there's a little write-up on that area. But how I like to do it is that the size of your empire depends on the size of your provinces, but each banner, which is the army inside of that map, is always going to be 2,000 points. So no one is at a super disadvantage. Now, if you get two banners next to each other, meaning your province can only ever have one, but if you have an allied banner next to you in an adjacent province, they can give you a bonus of 250 points, something small. So maneuverability becomes important. What you have to watch out for that is just like Death Starring on the table, where everyone crams all their heroes together. They do the same thing on the map. They'll have the giant wad of banners moving forward like the Death Star, because it's always supported. So you have to incorporate that into your designs, or just be okay with that. That's the natural tendency. And for me, how I break that up is simply having random events, which I love, that can affect the rear of their kingdom. And if they don't have armies back there to defend that, that can be a problem. So you can get as deep as you want. Azyr Empires, when I wrote that, which you can find if you Google for it, it's for Age of Sigmar, and it's complete. It's more of a resource campaign, but if you want ideas, that was a very large document. It took me a while to put together. You can still find it. If you can put that out there and manage that on the map, and use your random events or whatever, the map campaign for me is the ultimate campaign experience, because it gives you a game within a game. You have the map to go over, and you have the actual battles on the table. And you can break that into skirmish battles, warband battles, full Warhammer, old world battles, War Master battles. You can have multiple layers. And I love the intricate layers. Those are the campaigns that I organize and play. Now, I'm going to wrap up. We're getting close to being too long, but last thing to worry about with map campaigns. If you have a map and you have players on the map, one of the most common things you're going to encounter is players going to drop out, or players not going to show up, or players got family responsibilities that day. Any number of reasons why they can't show up. And the older you get, for you young guys, you'll see the more common this becomes. I don't like to assign factions to just one player. I do a team approach. So if I'm going to do, and you'll see this when I do the old world campaign I'm going to do with the narrative, what you'll see is that I will have probably either 2 or 3 different factions, and players will be assigned to each faction. And that way, a faction is not one person, it is multiple people, and then they usually have their own little chat group, and they could talk about strategies and handle their business. But if a person drops out, it doesn't stop the campaign. and you can add and remove people as it goes. So if you have a 6 to 8 month long campaigns, mine used to run a season, so I would say over the summer, or I would try to break it up into 5 months was about what I tried to do, because I like to leave a couple months off in the year. I used to do Warhammer and then 40K, and I did that every year. They would bounce back and forth, which left me 2 months to do something small with some other independent game for our group, because I used to run events for the stores. If you have that 5 month period, if someone wants to join in the middle of month 3, you just add them to a faction, and it's literally that easy. And if someone needs a drop, cool, they drop, or maybe month 2 to 2, 3, and 4 they have to drop because they're in school or whatever. They can come back in month 5. Nothing's disrupted. Your map continues to flow. So that is a lesson I learned with map campaigns. That is a summary of all the different campaigns. Again, if you can find Mighty Empires, the box, the art I'm showing you up on the screen, it goes for a ton of money, but the rules inside are worth looking at for sure. Tinker with some ideas. If you have your own systems, I'd like to hear about it. Again, in my channel, I'm going to leave an invite to my Discord if you want to be a part of a tabletop simulator virtual old world narrative campaign. I'm planning on running a map campaign. It'll be hosted on that Discord, and we'll play on Tabletop Simulator. I'm looking forward to that, to try out the campaign, or to try out the old world in general, but also because it's been a long time since I've gotten a campaign, and I really miss it. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, hit the like, subscribe, and we're only a few days out before the rules come out, and I'll get to give you my opinion on what that looks like as well. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care. Stay healthy, and we'll talk to you later.